All right, I think we can start. So, Mir Seerdet, or welcome to the first OpenResearch Meetup. We're very excited that you all could join us this evening so that we can share our knowledge with you and hopefully have some really interesting discussions during the talks and also, of course, after. So, how many of you have heard about OpenResearch before? Show of hands. Okay, looks good. Looks good. My colleagues have done a good job. Or you follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. If you don't, you should. So yeah, do that. And before we start with the talks, I would like to introduce OpenResearch a bit, tell you a bit about what we do for those who don't know us. So OpenResearch is a Austrian company founded in 2009, and we do innovative software solutions for our clients. Either we do it from scratch, so we take an idea and we work on it and we deliver a great solution at the end, or we join already existing projects and we bring them to the next level. So this is one part, but we also have our own software solution which we develop in-house, and it's called Twofold, and it's a disposition software. So also really cool solution that is in use in Vienna for, let's say, funeral companies or other companies that have logistic needs. So this is a bit about OpenResearch. We have different kinds of technologies that we do in our company, so everything from backend, front-end, mobile development. But today we will focus a bit on the front-end side. So my colleagues have prepared some really cool topics, and I hope you will like them. So I will introduce them quickly. Right? All right, let's do it like this. So Daniel is going to start with In Search of Good Search. So he will explore a bit what works and what doesn't with search bars. Daniel is a UX manager with quite some experience in the area as well as front end, and he's very excited to tell you a bit more about search engines and how to make a good search. Followed up with Valon's talk on micro frontends that scale. So really excited for your talk. And finished by Fatyon's talk on signal forms in Angular. So yeah, really excited to hear your talks today. If you have questions, I think we can have some question rounds after each talk. And then, of course, after the talks are over, we'll have a discussion round, and also with the food and drinks, there'll be enough opportunities to ask them questions and get to know them a bit better and talk about the topics a bit further. Yeah. And if you are interested to know more about OpenResearch, of course, there's a lot of our colleagues around, so have a chat, ask us anything you would like to know about OpenResearch. And if you want to know about open positions, you can come to me. I'll be happy to answer any questions and to meet all of you. All right, so without taking any more time, I'll give over to Daniel to start.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa, for the wonderful introduction. Let me also welcome all of you guys. Thanks for joining our first OpenResearch meetup. I have the honor to be the first presenter today, and my topic is about search. It's called In Search of Good Search. So we will investigate what is needed to have a good search. We will have a look into some good practices, also some bad practices, some aspects that need to be considered, and what works and what doesn't, and why search is sometimes complex, sometimes not. As Melissa said, my name is Daniel. I'm a UX manager at OpenResearch. I work in the Vienna office of OpenResearch. So it's also a pleasure for me to be here in Prishtina to share this topic with you guys. So I will start my presentation with a quote from Don Norman, who says that the best search designs meet people where they are, anticipate their needs, and make information easy to find. So when regarding search, it's always important to know what users might look for, how they might look for it, and try to anticipate that somehow. And with that being said, you can see that search is a very important topic, also not only for me, but I think in general when we talk about software development. And why is search so important? Because we want to eliminate guesswork. So we cannot guess how to find something or how to get to that information that we know. We want to eliminate that guesswork and want to have precision. So one thing is that search, of course, is a powerful tool. We know it as a tool. We're using it every day, not really thinking about it, what is behind all of that, but everyone knows it, everyone uses it. And as said before, it minimizes guesswork and also should offer shortcuts to information. And why are we using search? Because all of us are search dominant users, some more, some less, but you know these people that are even too lazy to type in the domain of a website. They go to Google and put in Facebook, put in Instagram, and then navigate to that website. And also search is important to keep your users, because when you have a search that is ineffective, then you might also have users that are frustrated and might use another tool or another website or another software. So why do users search? The first thing is to anticipate the user intent. And here we can differentiate between three types of user intent. The first one is navigational intent. So here the user roughly knows what he is looking for and where he wants to go. So he also knows a little bit more than with the other intents how to formulate his or her search query. So for example, like mentioned before, would be Facebook login or cancel subscription. So they know where to go and type that in. Then we have informational intent. Here the user doesn't necessarily need to go somewhere, to navigate somewhere, but is in search of information. So one example query would be, how does AI search work? He's not looking like maybe for a specific page, but for the information that is behind the search query. And then we also have a transactional intent, which is where the user really wants to do something. So he wants to buy shoes. Let's say he types in buy black shoes, or start free trial for VPN subscription. So here he wants to do something. He might not necessarily know which VPN service he wants to use, but he knows that he wants to do something. So this is the transactional intent. And with all these intents, we have like a process or a timeline, and there we want to have a short look into it. So when searching for something, you start with a search input. Here you can have simple inputs like formulate a query, input a normal query, or you have extended inputs where you already filter before you search or do some configurations. And after this first search input, you usually get some suggestions before you get to a list of results. But with these suggestions, you have to assess if they are relevant for you, if you want to do some further filtering, and then need to decide, okay, is this suggestion good to me, or do I need to go one step further? So the next step would be the list of results. And here you have a lot to do. Screen the results, seek validation, try to comprehend all the information and the results, do some additional filtering, sorting, maybe some pagination, assess the relevance, and again decide, okay, do I have like one result to go one step further again or not? Do I have to go back maybe to reformulate my query? And then when you go to a specific result, again, you have to seek validation, see if this is relevant to you, and decide, is this the information that I wanted to get to or no? So this sounds like a lot, but this process for one result is usually an interaction that is between 10 seconds and 20 seconds. So this sounds not a lot, but if the result is not the desired result, you have to go back. again, you will screen the list, decide, is the information relevant for me, go to the result, maybe go back, and so on. So what can we do about this? We try to have the results that are as relevant as possible, and maybe offer a shortcut to the user so that he doesn't have to go to the list of results again. So what is nowadays a common thing is that you offer the shortcut from the suggestion directly to the result. So not only suggest terms that he might look for, but the results. And we will have a further look into that with some good practices. So we start with some simple things, with making the search box visible. So this is one thing that is obvious. And here we have one example from the Financial Times website. The search is visible, you would think, because you see this magnify icon. But this is not a good example, because studies show that the text input field, so not only the icon, but the actual field, increases search queries by about 30%. And also, what you want to do is to place it prominently. So the best practice here, and this is, of course, everything that I tell you depends on the context, on the users, on the application that we use. But like in general, studies show that placing it on the top, in the center, leads to the most or the best rate of search queries. So we want to have a good placement. And also what we want to have is a submit button, because also just placing the submit button, even though users, especially on desktop applications, might not necessarily use that, also increases the search queries. Then, of course, the input field should also be long enough so that you don't get your search query cut in the middle. So you should always be seeing what you're typing into it. And also one important thing that you can see, maybe you cannot see it perfectly, on this example of LinkedIn, is that you also should get some visual feedback. Like when you search for something and it's still loading, you should see that. And this is also one thing that is important in regards to the search box. And then coming back to auto-suggestions, there we have different types of auto-suggest. We have auto-suggest before typing, so you put your focus into the input and then immediately suggest box pops out below, like here in this example in Stack Overflow, where you also have suggestions to specific prefixes to already narrow down your input beforehand to find a more specific result. And then also for YouTube, you have auto-suggest. For example, this was my recent search. I searched for OpenResearch, Albanian hits, and today's Frontend Meetup. So when I put my focus into the YouTube search, it immediately shows me my last search queries. And also, for example, Microsoft Teams does a really good job here, because there the suggestions are also a little bit context-based, where you immediately have filters to search for messages, files, but also can search directly in the chat that is currently opened. So this is like a context-based auto-suggest. These are just some examples what you can do with auto-suggest before typing. Then, of course, you also have auto-suggest while typing. For example, here, when you put in search and it shows the recent searches, now opposed to the example before with YouTube, this is not personalized. Here you have like a summary of recent searches of all users of that platform, and it shows the most used search terms that include this one-term search. And also here, Google, when I again search for Prishtina, it shows me Prishtina flights, Prishtina weather, airport, and so on. But you notice one difference between these two examples. The first one is highlighting the search term that I have as an input, and the other one on Google is highlighting the other part. And here we also have one practice that is better, and I think you can see it with these examples. It's the second one, because when you highlight the differences rather than the similarities, then these suggestions stand out more. And then, of course, you also have auto-suggest with instant results. Now we come back to this shortcut that I talked about earlier, where here in this example of Confluence, when you type in marketing strategy, you immediately have actual results. So it's not suggesting the term, it's suggesting a result. And also what is nice here is that these results are displayed differently, dependent on the type of content. So you have these icons for normal pages, then this a sheet icon for this Excel file, and also have some instant filters within the auto-suggest. So this is a really good example that I like a lot. But, there's also a but, of course, there's always a but. Suggested terms that return 0 results or irrelevant results are worse than are unhelpful. They sidetrack users and are downright irritating. So, really important thing here is, if auto-suggest doesn't offer a faster, more reliable path to a good result, then don't use it. This is really important. It's not like, okay, I heard auto-suggest is the good thing, it offers the shortcut, only when it offers relevant results. So this is one thing in search in general. The search has to be performant, has to offer relevant results. So if this is not the case, and if you have a backend maybe that doesn't offer this, then maybe it's better to not use it. Another thing to consider is also visual confirmation, which also depends heavily on the context. Like here with IKEA, when you search for a table, you see the search results showing the picture of the table, and then the titles, which for IKEA, of course, do not have table in it, but have titles like Linmann or Lackkapten or other stuff. But it's still okay because you're searching for a table, you see it immediately, and you know you have this visual confirmation if this is what you're looking for. But now imagine if IKEA would not use images, then it would look like this. And here, when searching for a table, you would kind of get lost because you don't have a quick confirmation if this is the information that you were looking for. Then also you can customize the presentation of the results. As mentioned before, with this Confluence example, you have different type of content that shows up in the results. And like 20 years ago, you would show everything in a list, don't differentiate it. But here, the best example for me is Google. Here I search for Prishtina Mall, and as it is a place, of course, it shows me all the place relevant data, like the Google Maps, with the information, how long is it open, and so on. Then here we have the website of Prishtina Mall, TripAdvisor reviews. Then what's also cool on Google, you have like some frequently asked questions and answers, and then also videos. And you see all of this different type of data is visualized in a different way. So what Google is doing here is it actually offers me a customized landing page for my individual search query. And this is really cool. So if you're working with a system where you also like have different type of data, think of also displaying this differently, because specific data can then stand out more in opposite of other things. And maybe like when you're searching for documents, if it is a software which is really relying on documents, then you can display this also differently and highlight specific things. So this is always good, but again, it depends on the context. Then you have things like expert search and advanced search. One example from Jira, maybe most of you guys know this search. In Jira, you cannot only use a traditional search, but can also use the JQL language to search. And I know, in fact, a lot of users that prefer this search, including me in Jira, because for this system, it's just a good way to find stuff easily, and the users that are using it are very familiar with this type of input. So this is what we consider an expert search. But you also have advanced search, which shows up somewhere else than the traditional search. For example, in GitHub, you also have advanced search where you have more input fields, where you can narrow down what you're looking for. And this is also something that is there, that is maybe not used that often, but like in specific use cases, it can be very helpful. And then, of course, one obvious thing, sort and filter. I don't know any search anymore which does not have sorting and filtering options. And one example here is from the job platform Indeed, where you would look for a job as a software engineer. And there you would not only look for that with the term, but maybe have the preference to only work remote. It should be in a specific area. So this is type of search where the filters are very helpful. Also again, Jira, where you can filter for specific projects, for specific status, for the issues. And also, like this, I think this is an example where you need filters a lot. It's like booking platforms, because especially here you need to filter, okay, has it a good review, has it breakfast included, has it a sauna, has it a jacuzzi, is it a 5-star hotel, and so on. But yeah, this is an example that I really like a lot, because I don't know any booking platform that doesn't have filters, and they usually have a lot of filters. And people are not like overwhelmed with this amount of filters for booking platforms, because they're used to it and they also need it and they're using it. And one important thing here is that you always should display active filters. And this can also be displayed in different ways, like really specifically displaying the filter, or for some filters where you have filter categories and you selected a lot of filters, it's not always possible to show all them. Then you would maybe show a number of, example here, job type, you have 2 active filters, but at least show that you have active filters, otherwise you will get lost. And then you can also have personalization in search, as seen before, my personalized YouTube search with my last searches, or also again Microsoft Teams, where you would have suggestions for people that you were chatting with lately, or your last search queries. So this is always also something that is very helpful for users when it's personalized. And one thing, especially for mobile applications, and especially for applications that you maybe use on the go when you're on the street and not like totally focusing on it, is voice input, like Google Maps, just putting in your voice input instead of putting in a long, complex address where you also make typos and so on. Or also like Amazon offers it. Almost every mobile platform from the like well-known apps offer voice input. Also YouTube, of course, or also the Safari mobile app. As you could see with these examples, it's in regards to design not just about how it looks like and how it feels like, it's even more about how it works. And this is what I also meant with the auto-suggest example. It's important how it works. You can have an auto-suggest that looks fancy and pops up and has shadows and what, I don't know, but doesn't matter when it doesn't work. So this is one important thing. And with that being said, we can move to some bad practices and pitfalls that you can have here. For example, coming back to autosuggest, and now an example how it would be when it doesn't work, weird autosuggest suggestions. Like on this website, it's the CIA website, where you have a search for countries, and you have an autosuggest and you put in NE, and the suggestion list is ordered alphabetically. It's not ordered by relevance. And so it shows Brunei as the first result because it has NE in it, but it doesn't show Netherlands, which actually would start with NE. So this is a really bad example. Also here one example from a user that searched for the game Chorus on the Microsoft Xbox app. And here you can see the game Chorus doesn't even show up at the top results. The real result, it was somewhere below, like at the bottom of this list, but you would expect it, like when you type this title even in, that it would show up at as the first result, but it was not this way. So also here, obviously you have something in the system that does not work well in regards of this relevant sorting. Then, coming back to this extended advanced search, you can have a cognitive overload for the user. Like this is the advanced Google book search, where you have many fields and options, but the user might just get overwhelmed with this view. So here, the thing is, you don't have to reveal everything at once. You can hide specific things. You can make some parts collapsible so that the first impression for the user is not, whoa, okay, where do I have to start? But like structure the inputs a little bit into groups and so on. And also one thing, don't overrate pagination. We see this still a lot of times, like this classical pagination, but let's be honest, who expects the perfect result at page 9 or page 31? Instead, just use a show more button. This is more modern, and there's no need for this pagination anymore. Don't overrate it. And then, of course, we have some additional pitfalls, like lack of synonym recognition or literal matching when it comes to search. Like when you would search for laptop and it doesn't give you any result because they would only show up with notebook. So this would also be a pitfall. Or ignoring the user intent. Like, let's say the user is on a website and use the website search for a subscription-based product and searches for cancel subscription, but the system is only searching for subscription because it doesn't have the keywords cancel, and it offers you a article which like promotes the subscription. You would not look for that. Or poor result ranking, like the example shown before, like when you have no relevance in the list. Or the absence of filters and sorting, this is a must. Filters and sorting is a must. And then one pitfall would also be like poor handling of errors and misspellings. Like when you have one typo and you get 0 results, better thing would be either to recognize this or to offer you, did you maybe mean X, Y, Z instead of ABC? And also like missing feedback for 0 results lists. Like there's no worse thing that having no results and you get to a results page and it just shows 0 results. Instead, maybe suggest some similar products, or also like suggest, you might notice, like with this and this filters that you have chosen, I have no results, but putting out this and this, I would have these following results and stuff like this. So offer the user something that he stays here and doesn't get frustrated. And of course, slow performance. Like again, when we talk about auto-suggest, worst thing is that as soon as the user enters another character, that you have to wait 5 seconds again before it shows the next result. Yeah, so these were some good examples, some bad examples. But I think what's also interesting is what is when it comes to AI, from queries to conversations. So how will AI influence the behavior of search? And also there we have some aspects that we need to look at, some things, some concepts that we know already for years, some new things popping out, and we start with semantic search. So the bigger platforms that we know, all of them use semantic search. For example, when you search on Amazon and type in chair for small balcony, then Amazon will not search for products that have balcony in the title or in the description, but they will try to interpret what you're searching for. Like, what does a chair for small balcony needs to have? Like, needs to be, of course, small, maybe thin, maybe foldable, maybe made up of some material that is suitable for using outdoors, and so on. And then something newer are these AI overviews and summaries. For example, when I search for hamstring injury on Google, first of all, I get a nice summary and overview of what this is. I have a list of symptoms, then a grades of this injury, also the same on Bing, where I get a nice summary of this injury. So these overviews are really something that might be helpful also as a first step, where you also have this shortcut. You maybe don't need to look further because you have this informational intent. And then, of course, conversational search. Also, every one of us knows this. For example, ChatGPT, you ask something, you get an answer, then you refine it, you get an answer, then you correct it, you get an answer, and so on. You go back and forth, then you leave it, come back later, and follow up where you left off. So this is really cool thing here. So this is also for, especially for informational search, something really cool. But this AI chatbots are also cool when it comes to shortcuts, like when I have transactional intent, where like years ago, when I formulate an email and you need maybe a template or something, you would look for the template and adapt it. But nowadays you just say, please formulate this and this for me, and you have this shortcut to the information that you wanted. But, also here, but generative AI is reshaping how people search for information, but long-standing habits persist. So search habits are really sticky with people. So when you're used to scanning lists, you will not stop that from today to tomorrow. And also AI doesn't eliminate the need of search, it rather complements it somehow, that you maybe start with an AI chatbot and then follow up on a traditional search engine or a product website and so on. And what's also important here, like we people, we are from tech industry, we get used to this easily. Our habits can change more easily, but this doesn't apply to most consumers. Like when you think maybe of your parents, or I don't know, this doesn't apply to most of the consumers yet. So let's have a short conclusion. As you could see, there is no single best practice. It always depends. Search is sometimes complex, sometimes it's simple, sometimes maybe a good auto-suggestion can beat a semantic search when it's really performing well. Then designing search is a process. It's not a static screen, so placing an input field on a mockup screen is not enough. You have to think about things like micro-interactions, auto-suggest, loading animations. What do you do when you have 0 results? How do you display the results for different types of content, and so on. And also, design and engineering have to work closely together. So this includes UX and UI, it includes front-end engineering, but it also heavily includes backend, because there you have the APIs, things like semantic search, trying to boost your performance, to have a relevance-based sorting, but it also includes data science, because it's also about content, and also about understanding content and synonyms and stuff like that. And it also includes analytics, because you also need to look at some insights. What are the people really looking for? Do I have search queries that don't have any results? Do I have to change something here? So this is also very important. And again, AI is complementing, but it's not replacing traditional search. And in regards to search, you have to continuously tune your search based on behavior and data. And the perfect example for this is also like Google's PageRank algorithm. You always have to look into the data, you always have to adapt and refine. So it's not just one thing that is finished, it's an ongoing process. And with that being said, I hope I could give you some further insights, like maybe something to think about, or maybe something that you found interesting, and that you have in your mindset that good search is not just a feature, search is an ecosystem. And with that, I thank you all for your attention. And yeah, if you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming today. To be honest, I was bored like all week to see Spetim's face. So now like at least I can see some new faces on the office. And it's not always so full, like. So thank you for joining us. Today, like Melissa introduced me, I'm Valon Chaboni. I'm a front-end developer at OpenResearch, and I picked the topic today for the same reason. I have a beef kind of with these backend guys, and they are talking about microservice for a long time, and we wanted to show them, okay, we can also do that. It's not some fancy stuff, so we can do that also on front-end. Now, that's not the reason, but yeah, that's just... Okay, so what is actually the problem and why this topic popped up? So it's when we have a team of 5 developers, nothing's complicated, we can have one app, everybody's synchronized, that's not a big problem. When start growing, and that's what everybody wants, to start growing, but you know, you start seeing problems and so on. And when you have, let's say, 15 developers, then it starts to get messy. It's not maybe that it's a big problem, but you start seeing problems there. But if you are like 50 developers, it's a complete chaos. So it's not an option to work normally, to have like everybody on the same project and just to work as usual, a small project. So we have these daily realities, which is the build time will increase a lot. We have single point of failure because we have one team of 50 people, everybody working on the same exact code, and of course merge conflicts and deployment pressure, because every time we're building the same chunk of app that is responsible for the whole logic. So as the team grows and we start seeing impacts of this team grow, the most things that you can right away notice is that feature delivery will increase. And even with the same feature, let's say you have whatever single form that you will do, if you have a really large application code base, doing that, it's much more complicated because you need to consider a lot of context through all the application and so on. So originally, also the feature delivery will be increased. Of course, teams will be blocking teams because you need to wait for one page to be able to continue with another one, and you always have features that are blocking other features. Of course, also deployment risk, because as I said, everybody is deploying something, everybody is working on the same application, but one failure can fail the whole app, which is not what we really want. And of course, the least important thing, developer happiness. Of course, if we have a large code base, a lot of people working on it, we won't be so happy around it. So what's the solution that I'm going to try to present today, at least give you an initial idea, is what if we don't have this one big app? Of course, 2.5 megabytes is not a big app, but this is just a short demo I've done here. But what if we can chunk this and separate this into separate teams and have each team being responsible for its micro frontend, and have a shell that loads these micro frontends at runtime. So what's the key benefits for doing that? It's first, we have team independence. Now we can split the big project into, let's say, 5-people team, and now they have it much more simple to work on the project. It's a clean environment. You don't have to think of the big picture and so on. You only need to focus on one specific thing. Is independent deployment, which is one of the most important things. If you're working on one micro frontend, you can do 50 deployments a week, and that won't be any problem, and nobody from other teams will really care about. Technology flexibility is also something that it's a good thing with module federation, because now it's possible that you have one application, but inside it you can have multiple micro frontends that basically don't have to be all Angular. So we can have one big app, one page can be Angular, one page can be Vue.js, one page can be React. And this is totally doable and easily done nowadays. And of course, fault isolation. Now, if something goes wrong, if we have this big app, it's a bit problematic to see, okay, whose fault was this? But if you have these separated teams, it's so easy to narrow down the problem and to find the real issue. So just a bit of history to go back. This was kind of possible even before, but let's say in 2000s we had iframes, and iframes were perfect isolation, but the UX, as Daniel would say, it was terrible, so it was not a good solution. Then later on, in 2010, we had these NPM packages, which was really cool. But the thing with NPM packages is that, let's say you have one shell app, and every micro frontend is an NPM package. Always you need to download these packages into your shell, build the shell, and deploy. So if one of the packages changes, you need to do the same process. Download that package, build the shell, redeploy again, which is not what we want. And we have web components, which were a really cool thing when they popped up, and basically they were all happy about it, to say so, because they were standard based and you could do on all frameworks. It was the same syntax, but then it gets complicated because the syntax is very complicated. They are not, for example, from Internet Explorer, then they were not supported at all. And of course, as the application grows, that code is not good to see, and also it's not developer friendly, and nobody wants to work that way anymore. So the breakthrough and the important thing that happened in 2020 is from Zach Jackson, which is basically a Webpack employee, which he suggested, okay, until now we needed to build first everything and then deploy. He said, okay, but why it's not possible to load modules at runtime application? Why it's not possible that I have one shell and I put it on the software, and if he needs one module, he can download it. If he doesn't need it, he doesn't need to download it. So good enough, the C-level said, okay, you can go for it, you can implement it, and he brought us the first feature on Webpack 5, which actually allowed us to do module federation. So before, as I said, if you needed one shared package, you need to do import shared package, and of course this has to be beforehand, then build and deploy. But now, after module federation, is that now you can dynamically run code that is not at build time. So you can load at runtime whatever module that you need. So what does that mean? If I can have an analogy, it's like code carpooling. So instead of having 3 applications of 2 megabytes each, having Angular, some shared utilities and functions, I can decide to put everything that's common and shared in a shared layer. And then, let's say we have a store and we have product store and cart. Both of them can hold only specific things that are only relevant to this micro frontend, and everything that both use can be put on the shared layer here. And why is this good? Because now we can have shared dependencies, we have a faster loading, because now the shell, the initial loading time, it's much more faster because we have a smaller bundle size, and while navigating conditionally and so on, we load the other modules. And of course, the most important part for this reason is the independent deployment, which I will get back later. So to not like be everything just like, this is a Webpack config. So for anybody context, if you don't know what Webpack is just basically a bundler. What it does is, let's say, for Angular, it just translates every TypeScript file and other file into JavaScript executable file. And this here is basically a plugin that I'm using for Angular. It was done from Angular architects. What this plugin does is exactly just wraps the Webpack so that we don't have to be experts on Webpack, each one of us. But now we can easily, with 2 commands, add a micro app and the configuration will be there. But even that it's easy like that to add it, I would like to show you how the configuration looks like and what it means. So for example, here I have the configuration of the shell. So the shell, the name of course, it's you know it, but here is the important part. We define what remotes this shell can load. Here I have 2 remotes for this demo example. One is products page, which, as you can notice, it's running on a local server with a different port. And cart is also on another port. So we have a shell that's running on 4200, a different port, and also it loads 2 other micro apps that are running on completely different servers. So, and also at the bottom here we have the shared layer. Here we define everything that is common to each one of these micro apps, and everybody should use it or must use it. I will explain what the details tell you. Okay, also singleton true. This is just important to mention because all the libraries that do have a shared state, like for example Angular needs a shared state, we need always to have just one instance of that package running on our app. And this allows that. So for all, the thing that you need to remember is that if your package or library needs a shared state, then you need to put it as singleton true, and because it needs to have only one instance in order for that shared state to work. I showed you the shell configuration. Now what about the micro apps? How do you configure the micro apps so that they can load into the shell? This is how the configuration look for the products page. And this product page is a Webpack based builder. So the builder for this page is Webpack. I need you to remember this. And you can see the structure pretty straightforward. You define the name of the micro app, which is products. You have this file name, which is remote entry.js. And basically, this is the only entry point that the shell will load. Everything else, it's dependent on the micro app. They don't need to care about that. And also here, I'm telling the Webpack what I'm exposing. So if you have a products page, in this case, I decided to expose the app routes, which basically allows you to have the all inner functionality of this products page. And shared, as I said, you put all the shared items, like for example, we have put the Angular core and common into the shared layer. And you can see on the shell, the routes are just Angular, normal Angular routes. When a user goes to the products, it lazy loads a module, which is the products module. And yeah, for the same reason, as I said, the products page is running on a completely different server. But for the demo purposes, I made one service which is being shared between these two micro apps. Basically, this service is living on the shell host, and each products and cards are injecting into it, and whenever a user clicks add one product to the cart, it calls this service, and then since the cart is also listening to that, it will update the cart state. This is not production suggestion, so you need to understand when you decide to use micro frontends, you should avoid having shared things between micro apps as much as you can, because then you lose the logic of why having micro apps. So the only thing you need to share and you must share is the authentication authorization part. So you authenticate the user and you authorize it for specific things he can do. The rest should live on the API state level. So the backend is still connected, everything is there. So you communicate with the backend, you do the action on the backend, and whatever you're using, either server-sent events or WebSockets, will update the cart or whatever. But for demo purposes, I've just made this service available so that we can see the communication. So as I said, when the shell loads the products micro app, what happens is we've loaded only one entry point. We told them the door, and now inside we have these all products, books, electronics routes, which are normal Angular routes here, and basically they work just as a normal Angular app. So the shell doesn't need to know about the internal things of the micro app. And you still have this feeling of single page application. Even that you're loading micro apps and so on, you still have the feeling that everything is one single app. But the dilemma started in 2022. Webpack, this feature was great, and it was very welcome from everyone in the community. But Webpack is getting slower and slower and slower. And the reason for that is because Webpack is built on JavaScript. JavaScript needs to be translated to Node.js, and Node.js to a lower level, and then to the machine language. But ES build, which basically Vite is built on top of it, is using directly Go language, and that's very lower language than JavaScript, so the build time is much more faster. So now a lot of companies are willing and wanting to move to Vite as a compiler. It basically does the same thing like the Webpack, but this feature was very locked into only Webpack. So in 2022, now we have a new thing popping up, and that is called native federation. What native federation allowed us, is that we can still do micro frontends and module federation, but we do it on a bit different way, because now this supports every bundler. Now you don't have to be locked into Webpack. You can just use any configuration. You can use a Webpack configuration, ES-build configuration, Vite, or something that will be in the future, because basically ES-build is based on the standards of ESM. So now, for example, one big difference that you can already see is, before, if you would like to load the module with Webpack, this is how you would write it. And this is pretty ugly syntax, not for us front-end developers, it's not very common to see that. And this is like standard. You can see it everywhere. There's one, because this is ESM. And now you have await import, you have export, basically on all different frameworks. It's the same thing. That's why with native federation, now we can do micro apps no matter what bundler we have on the back. And this is very important. So if we look at the difference on the configuration, it's almost identical. In fact, in this case, they are, for the things we are using, are identical at all. You don't see any difference. Just the file name here is federation.config.js, and there is webpack.config.js. So, as I told you, right now on the demo that I will show you, I have a shell, which is Angular 18, and it's running on one port. And then I have two different apps that are both card is on a native ES-build, and products is Webpack. Why is this important? This is important especially for big companies that were using Webpack and so on, and now they want to transition to Vite and so on, and they use micro apps. This demo will showcase you a very cool example that allows you to do this incrementally. So now, if you have, let's say, 15 micro apps, they are all Webpack, you don't have to switch all at once. You can have a shell that is possible to load both, no matter if you have a module federation or a native federation, and then you can go micro app by micro app and migrating them to ES-build. So this is a very solid solution that will help bigger projects gradually translate their code into like ES-build and not do everything at once and risk everything. So these are the real case scenarios and success stories from around the world. SAP, everybody probably knows them. They have more than 100 micro frontends, and they have more than 50 teams working on those. And strange enough or not, they do 200 deployments a day, which is pretty huge. And that's only possible because these apps are so small and so manageable that you can easily do a lot of deployments, and you don't have to be afraid that you will break everything on your business. So this is a decision graph. If you ever come up to a question, do I need to use micro frontends? You can easily decide it. If you have less than 5 developers, do not even think about it. If you have 5 to 15, then maybe, but first you should use monorepo, something like NX or something else, but that should cover mostly everything. And if you have more than 15 developers, then another question should come up. Do you need independent deployment or not? If you need independent deployment, you should go with micro frontends and federation. If not, you can still manage it, I think, perfectly. It's my opinion with a single code base like on monorepo NX. So this is the golden rule I want you to remember. Use micro frontends for organizational solutions and so on, not for tech-based solutions. It's not about technology here. It's more about structuring the organization. This is a very head-to-head comparison between module federation and native federation. Webpack is, for one thing, very good because it's more mature. We have a lot of plugins for it out of the box that helps us do complicated stuff. It's very large ecosystem, but it's locked to Webpack, and as I said, we have slower builds. So now that's the downfall for it. And of course, key concept is Webpack specific, doesn't work anywhere else because we have this Webpack required for importing modules. But with native federation, it works with any bundler. We have faster builds. It's future-proof. That's where the future is heading. And of course, it's a smaller ecosystem, but that doesn't mean that it is a problem because this is production level ready still. So which one to choose? choose module federation if you have an existing Webpack setup. If you need more mature, battle-tested solution, and there's something specific that you still cannot find on a native federation, and you want extensive documentation, because as I said, the community is bigger, and that's why the content about this topic is much more bigger, and you can find a lot of things easier. Choose native federation if you want bundler freedom, so you don't want to be locked up to Webpack or any other bundler. You are starting, so if you're starting a new project, my recommendation is that you always start with ESBuild as a bundler, and of course if you need federation, then you can also use native federation. As I said, both are production ready. Of course there are some problems when you start using micro apps, and the most important ones that I wanted to mention here is the first one is version mismatches. So now it's recommended that you have all your micro apps on the same version. For example, if all our setup is Angular, we need to have Angular on the same level. Otherwise, if we have this configuration, even that we can say here strict version false, but that's not recommended for Angular specifically. And now one shell uses Angular 18, but one micro frontend uses Angular 17, we will have runtime error. So what's the thing that we can do for that is, of course, have teams coordinating and doing at least every 6 months a synchronized upgrade of the tech that we are using. So the companies are doing that. And oversharing is the other problem. Oversharing is, for example, if I do this on my Webpack configuration, shared, share all, I'm telling Webpack basically go and check what's on the package JSON, and everything that's there share for all my micro apps, which is not optimal because we kind of lose the logic of why doing micro apps. So that's why we need to specifically tell what things we want to be shared there. And that's why it's better that you tell, okay, I want to share Angular core, I want to share Angular common, RxJS, and some other libraries that I'm doing, because when loading, now shell can say, okay, I have these 3 packages that are loaded, and I can easily load the module. But if I have the whole package JSON loaded, then he needs to negotiate all packages if they are compatible and so on. So it's a much more slower process. So this is the recommended way to do. Share only specific packages. And of course, that's for the user experience as well. I could not ignore this since Daniel was here. When you're trying to load, let's say, the products page, and now you have a problem on the micro app products, you will see a very ugly, unresponsive page. You need to have a downfall strategy that, okay, what should the user be presented with if we fail to load a specific micro app? As I said, this is just some rough example. If you have a large code base and it takes 45 seconds to do that, if you split it, it will be, let's say, 8 seconds for build, which is huge, like faster, much more faster. And of course, we have the deployment risk. As I said, on monolithic front-end application, you risk of breaking even if you change a small thing on the app. But here, you don't have that risk. You can break one part of that big app, but not like everything with a single line. And of course, the bundle size now is much more slower because we don't load everything we want at the beginning, but we just load what we need initially, and then when user navigates and goes deeper into our app, then we load what needs to be loaded. So that's why the initial loading time is much more faster. So what the key lessons that we need to take from this is if we need to have a successful micro app strategy and structure in place, we need to define some rules. So the first thing is we need to have a very clear of team boundaries. Each team should be responsible only for one specific micro app, and there should be boundaries that they cannot cross and they cannot do, because otherwise we can create more problems that we are solving. Communication. This is, as I said, avoid shared state whenever possible. If you need to have a shared state, you need to document the contracts that you are using to communicate on that shared state, and that's why my recommendation is only authentication authorization. In my view, most of apps is required to be shared. The rest can be just API shared. So, Of course, deployment strategy, you need to version your micro frontends, and you have to have a rollback plan in place. So if one micro frontend fails and breaks, we need to have a fallback plan that we load an older version of it and everything keeps moving. Monitoring, you need to track everything so that also you see where you're lacking of good optimization. And of course, this is recommended to do even beforehand, because it's not like a good idea just someday to come at the office, okay, this is one cool topic, module federation, micro frontends, and we can do that, because you need to have a deep insight of your metrics inside your company to really see if it matters and if it's worth of adding this complexity to your setup. Developer experience, as I said, if you have this split up, now everybody is much more happy. Instead of having 50 colleagues, they have now just 4, 3, and everything is much more simpler. We don't have this overload of having the bigger context for everything, so our life is easier that way. And I said, the golden rule, micro frontends solve people problems, not technical ones. So I don't want you to remember to forget this. Sorry. Yeah. And yeah, more and more companies are actually adapting to this. There's very cool tooling that are emerging from it. Like I said, for example, Angular architects have done these 2 great plugins that if you are working with Angular, it's really out of the box configuration, which is basically no-brainer to do that. But for sure, native federation and ES-built looks like the future. So if you're using Webpack, you need to start thinking how you can move to ES-built. If you start living, I mean, if you plan being a company for long enough. Remember, okay. I need you to remember these 5 points if you want to remember something about micro apps. It solves organizational problems. It's runtime code sharing, so not build time, but runtime code sharing. It's bundler freedom for native federation. And of course, if you are trying to move from Webpack to something like ES-built, please do it incrementally and do it step by step. So move one micro app at once and not like everything in one take. And of course, measure everything so that you have a good overview of what you're doing, makes sense, and everything. Okay, everyone that's here on the emails will receive also the demo examples and so on, but also you can find it on my GitHub if you want to download it and play around with it and break it and see like what works, what not. Maybe some code is generated from AI, but you don't have to mind about that. So. And yeah, if you want to continue the journey about diving deep into this, you want to maybe take a picture of this or you could search, but these are some of the best sources that I could come up with and present to you. If you want to learn deeper on this topic, I think if you are Angular developer, for sure Angular architects are the way to go because they have so much material on this. But of course, also Zach Jackson, as I said, was the founder of the first module federation on Webpack 5. But also you have these cool communities. So yeah, if you want to go deeper, no, I'm not done, so I'm not saying thank you. I will show you just like a demo that I have prepared. But I think I need to remove this first. Okay. Okay, so here, as you can see, I have this app that I was using this example through all the page. I don't know if it's visible enough. Maybe I can increase it a bit like this. So here, I have the products page. As I told you, this is Webpack based. This is a micro app. It's completely separate. It's running on a different server. But we have also the cart, which is ES-built and Vite based. It's on completely different local server. And you can see that you cannot notice that this is like separated apps. You kind of have still the feeling that this is a single page application and everything looks similar. And to do that, of course, Daniel will say you need to use design tokens. So you need to have some contracts that the design should look the same, the colors should look the same, the padding should look the same, and so on. But the things I want to point out is that even that we are having 3 servers running now, you cannot feel that you don't have one application running here. And as I told you, I have that shared service that basically allows also me to do add a cart to service, and even that this is a completely different application, it receives directly the products that are added to the cart. And yeah, the same works vice versa. So if I remove it, it should update the local state. If it would have been something here, then we would see that, okay, this product is removed from the cart. And if I just show you something really cool. So here, I've just some routes that I commented out. You can see the ones at the right. So now I have here one React app that I can load. This React app is uploaded somewhere on some server. It's not even on my local machine. I just have the entry point for it, and I can load it. You see, there's it uses this specific version, but it's an Angular, and it uses module federation. I have here another Angular app. This is an Azure server running, and it's basically, we were using an Angular 12 version, but this is completely being loaded from a remote server. And the same also Svelte, or whatever that's pronounced. So basically, this is another micro app that this is on some server. It's not even on my local machine. I just have the link to this micro app, and I can load it inside my page, and you won't notice that it's not on my code here. So, and if you just also interested to see a bit the code, so here on the source is the shell, and on the projects you can see I have two completely different Angular apps. Each one of them have their routes, their internal configuration, and so on. So it's just like a small Angular app. But it's on module federation, so Webpack, and we have this other one, which is a native federation, another Angular app, which is basically the same. But on our demo, you cannot notice it that this is not a single page application. So, as I told you, if you want to take a look at this code, is for one reason it's very cool, because it's basically, it allows the shell to load even Webpack or ES-Build, which is a really cool thing, and as I said, allows you to incrementally move to ES-Build and not just have that pain to all at once move you. So thank you, everyone. This was my topic. I hope you understood at least something, and I was not like overcomplicating everything.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Fatjan Nushi, and I'm a front-end developer at OpenResearch. Today I have a topic, and I chose Angular Signal Forms. My topic today has to do with introducing to Angular Signal Forms, a new era of reactivity on Angular Forms. I would like to start with the reason why I chose this topic. Angular has been revolutionizing the framework. It started with Angular 17 and 18 when introduced the signals. The reason why they started introducing signals, it was that they wanted somehow to get rid of RxJS. RxJS is very complicated for newcomers and beginners to this framework. And in order to create a simple form, it meant that for newcomers, they needed to have very deep knowledge about, first of all, the framework, and second of all, the library, the RxJS. The reason why I chose this topic is, first of all, I saw a guy named Manfred, and he did a presentation about 2 weeks ago where he said that signal forms are coming and they are completely independent from observables. And I said, yeah, that's kind of amazing. And with that, I said, let me try to get my hand on and see what I can do. I took this example where you can see on the left, I tried to create a very, very simple form with first name, last name, email, age. And I also tried an async validator. And I said, let me see how fast I can build this app. I could do this in just a couple of hours without having a previous knowledge on signal forms. Here on the right side, I also presented on the demo. We can see that the code is quite readable and very simple. It's very straightforward and very, very, very readable. This brings us the question, what was the problem with the traditional forms? First of all, it was the RxJS complexity. As I said before, reactive forms heavily relied on RxJS. It meant that for everything, we had to have a very deep knowledge of this library. The second reason was boilerplate code. If you're familiar with reactive forms, we know that in order to have a very simple form, we had to know, for example, what are the form controls, form arrays, form builders, form groups, and etc. And the last reason is that the steep learning curve. So every newcomers who wanted to join this framework, it meant that it had to do a very steep learning curve in order just to get on board and to start with some simple forms and simple APIs. Then Angular said that we will come up to the task, and they tried to modernize the app starting from Angular 17 and moving forward. So how was the evolution of forms in Angular? Evolution of forms in Angular, if you all remember, if you started in the early 2016s, everything started with template-driven form. It was quite awesome, actually, to be honest, because in order to set it up, it was quite easy. Everything was in the HTML. If you needed the field to be required, you just put required in the template. If you needed a validation, you put it also in the template. For simple form, it worked perfectly. But what happened it was that when the form started to get more complicated, also the template became way too heavy. You could have a lot of if conditions, you had the directives, you have the conditional rendering, which made the template to be very, very heavy. And testing and scaling it was very hard, because in order to test, it meant that you needed to render the view and then to start testing it, which meant testing was becoming more harder. When it comes to reactive forms, for reactive forms, it worked quite good. It was very scalable, very predictable, and very testable. But it has just one issue, the learning curve. As I said before, if you wanted to start with reactive forms, you needed to learn a lot of stuff, not only for Angular, but also for other libraries. And then Angular team presented the signal forms. With the signal forms, it was quite fast because it was using Signal, which was built inside the Angular. And it meant that we got rid of observables. But the issue is that this is still quite new. It is evolving, and it has a very limited community. So it means that we still have to wait until it gets more stable. The question becomes, what are signal forms? I just need to emphasize this. Signal forms are still yet an experimental API that has not been released yet. It is promised to be released in Angular 21, and we can test it. It's still in beta phase. And I think, as everything, it will pass the beta, and then it will become the mainstream where we can play with it, use them, and work and create components around them. Some of the key features, for example, for Angular forms are they have a single source of truth. They have reactive views, which means that when you bind to the template, it immediately changes the validation and the error handling. It uses Signal as a primitive type. JavaScript promised that it will include in the future Signal as a primitive type, not just as not primitive. And it uses the model-first approach. Also, it's good to say that it has a strong type safety, which is one of the key reasons why we use TypeScript, because it's based on the type safety promise. And also it means that it uses declarative validation, which means that when we create the rules are there, whether we need them or not, but whoever wants to implement them can implement them quite easy. And the most important, developer experience, which means that from Angular 17, they started to take care of us, the developers, finally. This is a basic example. For example, we have a data model on the left side with username, email, and age. In order to get into form, it needs to transform to a signal form, which each input becomes a signal, and that one can be passed to the form. Let's start with this example. What is the form and what are the components? As we can see on the left side, we have three main distinctive building blocks. The first one is the model, the interface, which contains of these three fields. After that, we have the schema, which is responsible for validation. And then we have the data, which should be a signal. And after data, we have the form, where we're creating the form, and we're passing the data as a signal and also passing the scheme. So we can think of the scheme as a blueprint of how the form will look and also how the validation will be implemented. And we can also think of the model as something that interacts between them. So the model can be the single source of truth where we communicate. Here, also in this example, there are some basic validations. We can see that required, min length, email, and minimum, for example, for type of numbers. What about built-in validators? Also, signal forms are coming with built-in validators, and some of them are quite well known. For example, we have the required, which just ensures that whenever we want to use the required field, we can pass it to the schema by using, for example, username or last name, and it will be required immediately. So the form will not be valid if that does not pass. We have the min length and max length also built in, and I think they are self-explanatory. We also have the email, and min and max. They don't have to do with the character numbers, but they work for type number or type int, which means that we just need to pass a certain point in order to make this form valid. From this point, we have the built-in validators, but can we have also custom validators? And the answer is yes, we can. Because sometimes the built-in validators are not enough. Signal forms came with two types of validators. The first one is the validate, and the second one is error. We have these two types for a reason. The validate we can use, for example, when we want to validate something, but we want that the return response for that validation to be a bit more structured. When we want, for example, to have an array of objects. Maybe it's better if I show it in the example. This one, for example, we want to see if the email is passing. And we can see that it's starting with the validate, which is taking the value directly from the form. And then, for example, let's say we want a certain domain to belong to that user. It means that if the email doesn't end with that domain, we will return a message saying, for example, you can see that it's very well structured. It has a kind, it has a message. Otherwise, if this condition is not met, we will just return null or empty array, and it means that this validation passed. But beside that, we also have the error. We can see here in this second example, this returns a Boolean, a simple true or false. So if it fails, we can just return, for example, password must be at least 8 characters and containing certain characters. Otherwise, it will pass and the validation will succeed. I also wanted to talk about conditional validation. I think this is the hidden gem. Basically, it's to apply validation based on a condition. If we remember reactive forms, we had to know that, for example, in order to add a validation, we had to subscribe to an observable and to listen for value changes. Whenever the value changed, it meant that we either had to add an extra control or remove that control. And that became quite messy. It was hard to understand, and it meant that it could not be very certain because it was not type safe. And the custom validations came with two options. It was the basic conditional validation, and this one uses when. So for example, imagine having this schema, which we're passing an order, and we want that required field for a certain validation to be implemented only when something is matched. In our scenario, for example, we want that this validator to be triggered only if delivery method is shipping, which is quite nice. Or we can even say, for example, this field should be disabled when some if condition is met. It can be any type of condition. And the second type is predicate functions. Predicate functions come with two types. It's apply when value and apply when. It's quite similar. You don't have to worry about that, but we can say that the first one is only applied on field value, and the second one is applied when field state changes. So that's the only distinct part. So to see the example, we can see, for example, for payment schema, we want to apply a certain validation. For example, if method is equal to credit card, we want to make some field required, and we want to have a certain min length. So this is coming with conditional validation. And I think the conditional validation is the most important part when it comes to signal forms. What about nested forms, when we used to have an array with objects and with an extra array? Signal forms also handle that. They implemented a built-in feature called apply each. It means that if we had an array of objects, for example, imagine an address, that whenever you have to add another item in the list, it meant that we need to add extra validation each time. And apply each is the part that solves this one. Why apply each is good is because we have one single schema for each item. It means that it will stay consistent and we won't have a redundant code. I can demonstrate this by this piece of code. Imagine that we have this to-do item with a title and a completed of type Boolean, and this can be an array. Now imagine that you want to add another to-do and another to-do. In order for that to work, in the past, you had to add extra validation for each item. Now this is quite simple. Since we have the schema is important to the main schema, it means that we can use apply each for each item that we add or we remove without having to care for the control. All we have to do is to pass the path of to-dos, and we can say whatever kind of validation we want to have. So this is quite simple and quite straightforward and easy to read. What about when we had to work with multiple field validators? Also, that one is covered. We had the tree validators. The tree validators has validate tree, which passes the schema. You can pass the whole schema or just a part of schema that is suitable for you, and it returns a context. That context is taking, for example, the value from one of your fields, and then it's returning that value, and you can do whatever you want with that. So imagine if you had, for example, a from and to, like saying you want to buy a ticket to travel to Prishtina, and you're saying from Prishtina to Prishtina, that should be an error. And this is quite easy because we're getting the values directly from the form. It means that if from and to are equal, we are returning a very detailed error to that form. We're saying, for example, kind is round trip. We can define then in the template what we want to do with this error message. And we can say, for example, that this is the field that failed. We can pass as many parameters as we want. It's not an issue as long as we define it in our interface. I also wanted to mention that there are more type of validation. I didn't cover all of them. Another one is async validators, which is working on a synchronous call. That's also an example, but I don't have it with me. Now I would like to talk about another built-in function that's coming with signal forms, and that's submit. In the past, we used to make it like this. Imagine that we're having a save button. And whenever we press the save button, we had to make sure that first the form is valid. The form has been touched, and some fields are, for example, touched or dirty. Then we could say, hey, yeah, let's do this now. But this has been covered right now. We have now the submit, which takes the whole schema and returns you the form. This part of code will be triggered only if the form is valid. So if the form is not valid, this submit will not be triggered. It means that it will fall back to the return false, or if we want to do something else, display a message or something similar, it can fall after that. So this has been taken care from Angular signal forms. Now the question should be, should you migrate to signal forms? I would recommend you, because Angular 17 started with signals, and now they have come a mandatory part of Angular if you want to stay up to date, but not yet. For complex forms in the future, I would say yes, but for simple validation, we can still stick with template forms or reactive forms. But for now, it's still in the experimental phase. What did I gain from these signal forms? So I gained clarity because everything is right there and then. You don't have to think a lot about that. We gained reusability because now we can split the schemas in multiple places and we can call them from different components without having to define the form in multiple places. We gained conditional logic, which is for me the best feature so far. And we also gained type safety and testability. I'm saying testability because as long as we keep the template untouched or with as little function as possible, it means that it's going to be easier to test. That's a keynote. What did I lose? Or I'm not sure if this will count as a loss. We lost the CSS state classes. For example, we used to have the ng invalid when the reactive form used to fail. Now it's gone because it will be handled by the form, or even if we want it, we can add it by a custom class. We lost the template simplicity from time to time because in reactive forms, everything was handled in the TypeScript and nothing was handled in the template. But now it's like in between. Some stuff is handled in the template and most of the stuff is handled in TypeScript. And right now we don't have a stable API. As I mentioned before, this is still not released. It's going to be released hopefully in November. And the API is not stable, it's still in the experimental phase. That would be all. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions. Yeah. I also wanted to add that there are not a lot of resources. So if you jump right now into this topic, you will be the pioneer of it. But it means that most of the stuff that you need to investigate is going to be on your own time without too much links and too much information. But it's fun. Yeah.